Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Adventures, and today we're going to be doing the final episode of a playthrough of ABZU Deep Dive, and we'll be going through this really cool underwater, freshwater area with a bunch of freshwater fish and also a bunch of cool extinct animals that we'll be able to look at. So right now we're just going to make our way over to the ruins. Yeah. Now we can see the first species here is golden dart frogs, which are found from the Pacific coast of Colombia, and live in like high rainforests with very high rain, obviously like 5 millimeters or more per year, and like to live at altitudes between 100 and 200 meters with temperatures at least 26 degrees and humidity about 80 or 90. And they're pretty social. They tend to live in groups of up to 6, but in captivity they live in larger groups. But what it makes them really interesting is that they have this bright color, and a lot of these dart frogs have these bright colors to help warm out other animals, that they're big and poisonous and you don't want to mess with them. So they get a lot of these poisons from the ants and stuff they eat. So when something comes to attack them, they get leaks through their skin. So that's why they're called poison dart frogs, because in South America they'll often put the tips of their darts on the frogs so they can cover the poison, so it helps them to easily kill whatever they're hunting. And these guys will eat like small invertebrates and whatever they can find, like beetles and stuff, and that's where they get a lot of their poison from. And they're actually very interesting because they're very intelligent, and like even in captivity they can recognize human caregivers and live in groups up to 10 or 15. And one thing is also really funny is that how they breed is that they're pretty dedicated parents, which is unusual in frogs, because they lay their eggs in like small pools and leaves and such small places that can easily dry up. They often have to keep tabs on everyone, on all their babies, so that they don't lose their babies from getting dried, their little pools getting dried up, which is pretty interesting. You didn't think of that of frogs, but they're very intelligent by frog standards, and are pretty good parents, believe it or not. They especially like to lay their small their tadpoles in bromeliads, because they like have a little pool, tend to pool up in their leaves. Same with like hollow trees and such, where the tadpoles will feed on like algae and mosquito larvae, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's golden frog almost done. We'll move it to this next boy sitting right here. And you're pretty. This is Diplocaulus, which is a large tender-spondyle amphibian from the late Carboniferous and Permian, and also found, these specimens can also be found in Africa and North America, and is by far one of the well-known Lindispondyls because of its really interesting skull. You see there, it kind of looks like a boomerang, which a lot of people have some really weird ideas for. Some people think that there was a big fleshy membrane to go around them like a stingray, and they would move around at the bottom like a stingray. Some believe that it was so that predators would have a harder time, especially like the large fish that were living in the Lake Cambrian and bigger amphibians. They would try to use that to protect their so that larger predators could not swallow them. But even then, they are pretty big. They get to about 1 meter long, and yeah, that's pretty big. And looks like these colorations are based on a fire salamander, obviously being extinct. And note that not many preserved mummified specimens of Diplocaulus. We don't really know the color, but I think it's very interesting that they use the fire salamander for inspiration. And some people think like also that it was a hydrofoil, so that they could use it to be able to control how water flows over its body, so it could like dive and decrease drag and such. But a lot of that is very contentious. We kind of don't really know. But yeah, it's a very nice amphibian. Very cool, very big too. Let's see what else we want to find. We've got a tortoise. Yeah, I assume that's a red-head terrier, but Look at that. These are near cuties. It's kind of hard to see him there, but that's what I assume. It looks about the right size. Well, red-headed sliders are known quite common in the pet trade, and quite invasive in a lot of places because obviously introduced to places that are not native to. They're also called red-headed sliders, all that, and water sliders. They've got quite a few common names. They get to about 40 centimeters long, or 16 inches, but then average about 15 to 20. The females are technically bigger, or on average bigger, and live for about 40 years or so in captivity. Oh, yeah, that's about it. Well, those things is really interesting is that they're polyotherms, which means they're unable to regulate their body temperature by themselves, so they have to rely on the environment like other reptiles to control their body temperature. And they're found all across the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, and live in like whatever ponds and lakes and streams they can find, anything that's slow moving water. And sadly, since they're so common around the world as pets, often they been introduced into places like Australia, South Africa, Israel, Guam, and Asia, where they've become feral and its populations trying to take over native turtle populations, which kind of sucks. And they're very famous for they brumate, which is kind of different from hibernation. It's not quite as intense. They just like become very lethargic, though they will occasionally eat or come to the surface for food and air, so they'll sit to the bottom of like lakes in winter and then just chill, and where they do not eat or defecate and just chillax. May occasionally try and find something to eat, just because it's harder to survive in winter when being active. And other than that, that's pretty interesting. Very cool animals. We'll have a look what's going on here. Anything else we're missing? No, they're not by the looks of it. One thing about them is that they actually can live more than 40 years in the wild, but in captivity. Sometimes, because a lot of people don't know how to properly take care of reptiles, because they have a lot of special needs, like UVB lights and stuff, we really kind of struggle to keep them sometimes. I'm sure if you had a nice one, they could live for a long while if you take good care of them. Oh, look at that. Uh-oh. Let's jump in. Whee. Let's see what we can find hanging around here. Stuff over here. Pretty. Let me just quickly check something. Yeah, we should be good. Now we, look at that. There's a lot of interesting species here. We'll see the first one we grab onto. Here we have Anomalocaris, which is a very, very weird animal. It's from the Cambrian, which is about 500 million years ago, and was basically one of the first mega predators, or apex predators of the ecosystem. And they got about a meter long, which is, you'd think that's not that big compared to a lot of today things, but at the time, it was basically the T-Rex of the ocean at the time. And what's really weird about it is that when it was first discovered, there was like a piece of it that was thought to be a shrimp. The claspers there was thought to be a shrimp. Then another part, the mouth, was thought to be a jellyfish, and then they found another part, and then eventually they connected the pieces together and realized, whoa, this is actually a whole new animal. That's where it's got its name, Anomalocaris, which means abnormal or unlike other shrimp. And yeah, they get about to a meter long, and how they swim is that they use these undulating flaps on the side of their body that they use to like undulate, kind of like how a stingray swims, but a lot more like not with a fleshy wing, more with undulating flaps, and they're pretty interesting. And what they do is that they use these claspers to grab things like trilobites and such, and use them to crush them and hold food into their mouths, which is pretty interesting. And they're found in places like Canada with the Burgess shales. That's where they were discovered, and they've been found in Australia, and also there's a few species of them, some reaching about 1 meter long. Very interesting group. And most famously coming from the Burgess shales, which is a famous site where a lot of Cambrian life comes from. I think we'll move on to something else now. See what else we find. We got a Dolichorhynchops. Now, Dolichorhynchops is a polycotyledonid plesiosaur, so not a pliosaur, even though you think that the short neck. It's actually independently evolved its shorter neck, which is a thing in evolution called convergent evolution, where two different animals that are not that closely related evolve similar body plans or similar features for similar purposes. So these guys lived around the late Cretaceous in the Western Interior Seaway, which was a seaway that went through the middle of the North America around the late Cretaceous. So this was like about 75 million years ago. And these guys get to about 3 meters long. And one thing that you see here is that they're not swimming quite right because they're based on the dolphin animation rig. And how they'd swim as life is very similar to like turtles, that they'll use their front propeller flippers to propel themselves and use the back ones to help orientate themselves in the water column. So yeah, they're pretty much like just any other plesiosaur, eating fish, of course. We can see that here. And lived in the Western Interior Seaway itself. There's a lot of creatures actually in this game that are featured that live in the Western Interior Seaway that were going around and eating what they can. Very interesting animal, specialized in eating fish and squid and things like that. Nothing too big for him. Still a very interesting animal. Really like how they did the colors as well. See if we can get him to jump out the water. Nah, can't be bothered right now. Let's see if we can find the other one we're looking for. We can find a Helicoprion. There's one there. Let's see if we can get it. There we are. We got a Helicoprion. He looks like he's stuck a little bit. And Helicoprion is a very interesting animal from the early Permian that's found across like North America, Europe, and Australia, basically everywhere in between. Which is not quite a shark, but it's shark-like. It's believed to be more closely related to like chimeras, which we saw in the last episode with the deep sea stuff. So that's believed to be the closest relatives. And they're famous for being known from only tooth whorl, which you can see in here, which has many different interpretations. There was thoughts that they were like a razor, like almost like a... I don't even think of the name for them, but there's been many different interpretations of them. This is the most recent interpretation of the tooth whorl, which is kind of like a round whorl inside the jaw that was used to like pull soft-shelled fish or cephalopods out of hard shells. So it's kind of similar to like a weird sperm whale, but like from the early Permian and a fish. So that's like the closest analogy that we have today to their kind of ecology. And one really sad thing is that pretty much this entire reconstruction of them is pretty speculative, because we have not much preserved of like their actual soft tissue, because since they're a cartilaginous fish, or they have bones made of cartilage and not proper bone, it's very hard for them to fossilize, so only the enamel of the teeth usually fossilizes, so pretty much a lot of the stuff that we know about extinct sharks is really only from teeth, which is a little bit sad. But yeah, very interesting animal. I quite like it. Now I'll move on to meditate and have a look and see what we can find. Oh, we just landed on Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik's another nice one. Now, Tiktaalik is a fish from, I'm pretty sure the early Cambrian, no, not the early Cambrian, the late Devonian, and is believed to be one of our ancestors as our fish, lobe-fin fishes crawled onto land and became tetrapods. And this is showed by their anatomy. We can see that they started to develop like elbows and toes and things like that. You can see that's starting to happen in there. And generally just have a very crocodile-like body plan. So they look like they may have been wading in the water and such, similar to a crocodile. And what's also very interesting is that they get pretty big. They get about 2 meters long, found around Greenland and such. And starting to grow out elbows and such. And we've actually have a lot of evidence of with a few other amphibians, early like Tiktaalik, and then it goes into Ichthyosaurus and Archelon, how ray fin fishes evolved into tetrapods, which is quite interesting to do research on. And they are believed to have converted their swimming bladders into lungs, so they were able to breathe both air and through seawater or water in general, which is pretty interesting. And yeah, pretty interesting little fish, just eating what it can, doing its thing. So now I think we'll move on to something else, and then we'll go on to Anomalocaris and Helicoprion. Then we've got Dolly. Here's an Ammonite. Now, I couldn't really find a particular species for this Ammonite, but Ammonites are a very interesting group. They're found pretty much everywhere throughout the late Devonian to the end of the Cretaceous, so they had a huge range of where there were hundreds of different species that went through all sorts of different sizes. There were some that were tiny, some that were as big as 2 meters in diameter, so that's pretty huge. And they have these really weird coils similar to Nautilus that are used to be able to control their buoyancy. So if they want to fill up with water, they will go down. If they want to fill up with gas, they'll pull themselves up. So they say like ballast in a submarine. And they're pretty interesting. We have kind of not that much of an idea about their soft tissue, but we know that they were potentially probably like filter feeders, just swimming around and filtering through the water. Very interesting. Even though there's such a huge range of species, they're probably eating all sorts of different things. And yeah, they have huge variations in size. There's, believe it or not, their shells have a huge amount of significance to culture, especially with a lot of people thought that Ammonite cells were pretty much petrified snakes that were killed up by the devil, or even believed to have healing properties for a lot of cultures and such, which is pretty interesting to think how these finding these little fossils really influenced our culture before we realized they were actually what they actually were. So that's pretty interesting. We've got a Helicoprion there. We've got a Tiktaalik. Here we are. We've got a gar. So I believe the species this one is the alligator gar, which is the largest species of gar, which are from the early Cretaceous and have survived today, which kind of makes them living fossils. And what's really interesting, they have this long torpedo shape, and they have these jaws where they use to ambush prey. They have many different tooth rows in their long jaws because they look superficially like an alligator, and they tend to sit down and just slowly try to ambush prey ranging from fish to small mammals and even birds. And they live all through the bottom half of the United States and the Mississippi River and such. even though there's been some introduced in Singapore. They found some, which I think is just probably just people introducing them to areas they don't belong in. And they just eat whatever they can here. They're ambush predators, they eat fish, they'll scavenge whatever they can find. And they're not really... they've been seen as kind of like a nuisance fish, which has affected their numbers. But they have recently become like a really common fish. Oh, that's an ammonite. You've got to look back at the guy. There we are. And they've become recently quite a common fish to catch, because they get quite big. They can get up to about 3 meters long and up to like 40 kilos, 45 to 50 kilos, which is pretty big for a fish. So that's why they're becoming a common trophy fish now. But the only thing is that, yeah, obviously the habitat, got to protect them from overfishing and such, and protect the food. Protect our waterways, of course, that's what we've got to do. So now we'll move on to whatever we can find. There's another Dolichorhynchops. We don't want to talk to you. We're already done here. Another Tiktaalik. Another guy. Another Tiktaalik. Right, look at Diplocaulus. Isn't it cool how they just swim and just chilling? Oh, and then you get eaten. That's quite sad. We want to have a look at a smaller fish, don't we? There's a lot of really cool small fish hanging around about here. Oh yeah, here we have Arandaspis. Just chilling there by himself. I think he's safe, so we can have a talk about Arandaspis. Now, Arandaspis was a small, like, species of jawless fish, so it's closer related to things like a jawfish, like a lampreys, and not lampreys. Am I thinking lampreys? Oh. Yeah. So related to like jawless fish that we see today, like a hagfish. That's what I was meaning. Hagfish. So they're closely related to things like hagfish, and they come from the Ordovician period, which is about 480 to 470 million years ago. Found in Australia, Alice Springs, and was pretty much one of the oldest known vertebrates. They get to about 15 centimeters long and had these streamlined bodies with some rows of scutes. Oh. See if we can get back to them. There we are. There's a group of them here. They had the scutes, and they were protected by hard plates. You can see in the front here. And they were believed to be filter feeders, so they just have their mouths open and filter what they can. And also that they may have swum like a tadpole, because they didn't have fins, of course, so they probably swam around very similar to how tadpoles swim today. Look at the next one here. And now here we have, like, I think one of the last ones. This one's really interesting. It's a Acanthodes, which is an extinct genus of spiny sharks from Europe, North America, and Australia. They get to about 30 centimeters long, and they had no teeth, so they're believed to be filter feeders. And they've not been known from only a couple of cell bones and such. And they had a lot of fewer spines than a lot of their relatives. Though what really makes them weird is that we kind of have no idea where they are in the family tree, because they have features that are similar to both bony fish, so things like gar and clownfish, and then they have features similar to cartilaginous fish, which are things like sharks and rays. So it's really hard to figure out where they fit in the tree because of those characteristics that they kind of share with each other. So they're believed to be like a early ancestor for both these groups. So I think that's pretty interesting. Like they're a small, unassuming fish that obviously just is food for Helicoprion at the moment, but even though they're quite small and unassuming, they are quite important in our understanding of the history of fish and the history of evolution in general, actually. Because we believe they're kind of like a stem fish before we see a lot of these cartilaginous and bony fish, and evolved out to placoderms, which are armored fish that have armored heads, like Dunkleosteus, which we'll see later. Yeah, I think we're pretty much done here with these guys. I really can't think of anything else around here. It's pretty interesting. Okay, and then now we'll move on to... Yeah, I think we're done here. So now we'll just actually play the game. So first we gotta go and play through here. Oh, so I'm back. Turn the clock, make it stop. Oh. 2 chains. Oh, we got the glowing water. Isn't that freaky? Freaky deaky. Now I'll move it on to the next one, which is up here. Oh. Then we gotta run as fast as you can. Open it up. Then we gotta run back and do our job. Now we gotta turn it round. So we should be good in terms of volume. You guys can hear me. So we'll keep on going and doing our thing. Really. Oh. There we are. Time to go over and see these. Oh. Flying right to the corner. Aren't we intelligent? Can't leave all you guys behind. Oh, here we come to some very interesting species. We'll cling on to this one first. Here we have an Arapaima, which lives around the Amazon. It's pretty much one of the largest freshwater fish alive today. It's ridiculously ginormous. It has this very beautiful red patterning in the scales. See, it's just pretty beautiful. I love it. And they can get up to about 7 feet long, even though there have been reports of them getting up to 15 feet long, with adults being up to about 200 kilos, with a very streamlined body like this. Very, very cool fish. So they're found in the Amazon, and found in like Brazil, Peru, and the species has been introduced into East Asia by accident. And these actually some fish that actually can breathe from the surface, because sometimes in the Amazon the water can be very oxygen poor, so they often, to supplement that, they'll often come up to the surface and take a few gulps of air because they have a modified swim bladder which allows them to take in oxygen. And they like to spawn in rivers during low water levels, and the young hatch in a nest which is made by both parents, and the parents will protect those, especially the male. The male will protect the nest for about 3 months, and then they reach maturity at about 4 or 5 years old, with a lifespan in captivity. We don't know how long they live in the wild, for about 15-20 years, which is pretty interesting. And one thing that really affects these fish is overfishing, with exploiting their habitat, and illegal fishing. but we really have no idea how much this has actually affected their population, so that's why they're considered data deficient. We just need more information to see how their populations have been affected by overfishing and such. So now we're done with him. Already covered coelacanths in the last episode. And here we're looking for silver arowana, which are a very interesting group of fish. They look the most similar to the arowana here, which are found in South America as well, and commonly kept in aquariums. I've seen a few in like aquariums like pet shops, and some people own them privately. Very interesting group of fish. And they're found around Brazil, same places pretty much as the Arapaima, and they are pretty large. They get to about 3 feet long, but there have been some that we got up to like nearly 4 feet. And they're sometimes called dragonfish by aquarists because of their scales that are quite shiny. They kind of look like East Asian dragons. And they're also called monkeyfish because they're known to jump out of the water to catch prey like birds, bats, mice, and snakes. While though their diet also mainly considers of what they find like smaller fish, other animals that float on the surface. So they're pretty much known to jump out of the water, try and catch food, but they usually try to use as least energy as possible and just eat what they can off the surface. So being such a popular fish in aquariums for ornamentation, there have been a lot of issues with them being poached out of the environment with illegal fishing and such, and legal catching, so they're basically a protected species now to try and sustain their populations, especially with relatives like Asian arowana, which are even more prized in the aquarium. I can't even speak right. The aquarium, not the aquarium, the aquarium. So they're quite prized in aquaria collections. So there has been a lot of protection in place so not too many wild individuals can be taken out of the wild, and keeps the populations in the wild safe from overexploitation. And here we're going to have a look at another big extinct boy. Look at you big beauty. Now this is Archelon. No, I don't want to look at you. Why can't we grab onto you? Here we are. Now this is Archelon, which is also from the Western Interior Seaway, and is believed to be the largest turtle to ever exist. That gets the size is about 15 feet long from head to tail, and about a little over 2 tons. And it's just very interesting. It's also very similar in a lot of ways to leatherback sea turtles, because leatherback sea turtles don't have a full-on shell like these guys. It's more of a soft shell. And they also are more similar to things like loggerhead turtles because they're believed to be sit at the bottom, very slow swimmers, not as strong swimmers as leatherbacks. They tend to hang around on the bottom of the shallow oceans like the Western Interior Seaway, and often just try and eat many mollusks and whatever they can find. You can see that in their face, very similar to loggerheads. And one interesting about them is they're often only found with 3 flippers instead of 4. So a lot of them is either due to preservation, because sometimes smaller bones can easily be washed away, but a lot of people think it's a fun idea is that they're all bitten off by mosasaurs, just because mosasaurs were such a prevalent animal in Archelon's environment. Very cool animal. Yeah, and I think that's all we can say about it. Yeah, time to carry on. Let's play the game, actually, for a change. Instead of just talking about fishies. But I think that's why you're here. That's why we call it a deep dive, because we've gone looking at every fish and having some interesting, learning some stuff. Even I've been learning some stuff making this series. So it's always awesome. Nope. Looks like we've got to go up. Let me just quickly turn off my fan. It's making any noise. Oh, there we are. So now we've got to go to the next area. So now we're going to be moving on into There's the next giant area. Ooh, kablam. Now we've got a lot of new species here. We're going to start with him. Looks like we've got Ichthyosaurus, which is another very interesting marine reptile. It's also a huge group too. Ichthyosaurs were very common throughout the Mesozoic, from basically to the end of the Cretaceous. And they ranged in sizes. There were some that were tiny, some that got up to the sizes of humpbacks, and even there was one species, Gyrodus, that got 21 meters long. So very, very huge animals. But Ichthyosaurus is more of a smaller one, similar in size to modern day dolphins, about 3 meters long. And they're well known for being around Germany. They have very well preserved specimens. Some of them are even found with preserved fetuses inside them, which shows that they give live birth. You also see other adaptations that they have, like these big eyes to see in the dark, and also they swim very similar to like sharks. It's a good example of convergent evolution, and so we see that like both sharks, ichthyosaurs, and dolphins evolve like similar body shapes to help swim efficiently through the water, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, they pretty much just eat fish and whatever they can find. Believed to be fish and squid are the two main things, and also being give birth in water. So that's really what I can say about them. So we'll also see what else we can find. See if we can get you. I don't want to hang around with Ichthyosaurus too much. I want to get some other species. We have a Dunkleosteus. Now Dunkleosteus is a pretty big... It's the largest of the placoderm fish, which I mentioned earlier. They get up to about 6 meters long and about a ton. It's a quite heavy, bulky fish. And they are very famous for... They're believed to be suction feeders, so they'd use the pressure in their mouths to suck in prey before they crush them with their incredibly powerful jaws, which is believed to have a bite force of about 6 tons, so that's pretty impressive. And also one thing is, we'd actually really only find their skulls, so what we believe is their soft tissue is from smaller relatives, like a Cochleosteus, which is a smaller relative of Dunkleosteus. Pretty interesting group. And even like throughout their growth stages, the juveniles were actually still quite robust, and they basically just grew in size. They had very similar niches from when they were babies to when they were adults. The one thing about this reconstruction is that there's believed to be more soft tissue around the face, so they potentially could have some sort of lips, but we really don't know that, just comparing to what you see about the fish. But this little bony skull makes for an interesting look. To the next boy. Let's see what else we can find. Ooh, there's a Dakosaurus. Now Dakosaurus is pretty cool. Dakosaurus is a marine crocodile, or a mesozoikine, which is a group of crocodiles that evolved to live completely in the ocean. So they lost a lot of their scales and such and developed tail fins like this guy. And one interesting thing about Dakosaurus is that it has lived in the same niche, or same area as another species called Geosaurus, which we'll see soon, which these guys have these big bulky heads which are used to crush prey, and the other species, the Geosaurus, were a lot smaller, these guys got about 4.5 meters long, Geosaurus got only about 3 meters long. Now Dakosaurus was adapted for eating harder shell food and bigger animals, while Geosaurus was adapted for eating smaller prey with or maybe more like fish and such. So that shows, like, even in... So look, there's a Geosaurus right there. There's a good comparison. That shows how animals in the same environment will specialize to help avoid competition with each other. So another very interesting. You can even see the telltale... still have claws there. So the ancestry of land. There's another one there. So that you can still see the claws there, which is pretty cool. I need to find a Geosaurus so I can show you what I'm talking about. There's a small one there. There we are. That's a Geosaurus. A little bit smaller, not too different, but You can really see the smaller snout there, which is used to collect smaller fish. Both found in Europe. Yep, they found late Jurassic and early Cretaceous of Europe, both of them, and believed to have not laid eggs, but given live birth. But we really have kind of no idea because we haven't found any eggs or any marine crocodiles or mesosuchines with eggs inside them. Very interesting though. Let's see what else we can find. And we've done all the big boys here. I think we'll have a look at the Elasmosaurus over here. Keep the biggest for last, of course, and then we'll move and have a look at its little guys. Look at that. Now, Elasmosaurus was huge. Get to about 10 meters long. And we've also found in the Western Interior Seaway as well. No, I don't want to talk to the Ichthyosaurus. I already talked to you. Lived in the Western Interior Seaway along with Dolichorhynchops and Archelon. Pretty interesting animal. Why did I actually click off? That was dumb of me. We'll hang it on his head. I think that'll be fun. And they're really interesting because they also have the longest neck. They have a neck about 7 meters long, and have the most vertebrae out of any vertebrate in their neck, with about 72. And one really good thing is that they have these really small heads, which they use to sneak into shoals of fish, where they hang out under them and then use their heads to like sneak into a shoal. Very interesting mode of feeding. And a very big animal too. See these teeth, so they'd be able to trap slippery fish. And one really funny thing is that when it was first discovered, they actually put the head of Elasmosaurus on the tail. So it was really originally thought to have a very short neck and a very long tail. But from what we know now, it's the other way around. It's very interesting though. Usually swim around very flat, similar to turtles in a way. Some people describe it as like a snake sewn through a turtle's body, which they use these big front flippers to propel themselves around by using the back ones to move around. They even been suggested to swallow things like gastroliths, which are stones that help both to digest food and as ballast for helping them dive in the water. Also found, as I mentioned, in the Western Interior Seaway along with Dolichorhynchops and Archelon. So it's very interesting that they had a lot of animals from those areas. Very, very cool. And I think now we're going to move on to some smaller species. Have a look down here at some trilobites. I don't know what particular species of trilobite we've got here, but the trilobites themselves as a group are very interesting. They were basically lived from the Cambrian to the Permian, which was the big massive extinction that killed off 95% of all life. And there's some Ammonite relatives here, different genera. Can't really pick the specific genera, but they're all very interesting. These trilobites, they basically occupied every niche they could. There were some that swam like fish, there was some like these guys burrowing. A very diverse group. There's over 5,000 described species. And then we'll have a look at some other species we can find in here. We don't want to talk about Gal. Here we are, here's Paraspis. He's a really weird little boy. Now Paraspis is another type of jawless fish. Oh, and then they get eaten. Of course, that's just my luck. Now, Paraspis was a weird little jawless fish that's need to find again. It's kind of hard to spot them, and there's a few over there. Dakosaurus. Here's an interesting fish we'll talk about in the meantime. This is Gyrodus, which is found pretty much through all of the Mesozoic, from like the Jurassic and Cretaceous, and we get eaten again. That's Elasmosaurus. It's funny when you're trying to talk about something, they're like, nah, let me eat you. Let me eat you. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. I want to talk about these fishies. See? They don't let me. We can see some Gyrodus swimming around there. They're believed to be durophagus, which means they will eat pretty much anything. Well, not pretty much anything. They eat hard shelled food. Found pretty much anything that's hard. They're built for crushing. And there's another precipice that it ate. Very interesting group of fish, these Gyrodus. So there's another cool look at a Gyrodus. Very interesting fish. And the shoulder too. There's a precipice right there. There's a little shoal of the little orange ones. Let's see if we can get to one. See if we can get to one. Come on. Be good for me. Be good to me, please. You can see these smaller ones there. What makes them really interesting is that... Oh, stop. They're found in all sorts of... well, they're found at the Devonian, and they have this armor on the front of them to like try and protect from predators, along with these spikes and such. And they're believed to be also about 20 centimeters in length. Not 20 meters, that's pretty huge. 20 centimeters in length, and believed to be plankton feeders because they've just opened their mouths and let water sift through their gills where they pick up plankton and swallow them. And they're also believed to be very similar, swim like a tadpole there. You can see them swimming along with the Acanthodes, small little orange ones. Very interesting little fish with the spikes to try and protect them from. And they need to be a good swimmer, swimming similar to like other fish, since they have no proper flippers or fins, I should say. They sit there swimming like a tadpole. Still a very interesting group of fish. So I think now that we've done talking about them, we'll just carry on with the game. Who doesn't like playing video games? I'll move on to just do this one over here. Uh-oh. Now we've got to make our way over there and actually play the game for change. Speedy time. See, there's a little precipice swimming there. It's a very interesting prehistoric species featured here. I like how there's a mixture of some that are not extremely known, like Geosaurus and Dakosaurus, along with some common ones like Archelon and Ichthyosaurus and Elasmosaurus. Very good mixture in my opinion. I like me a good mixture. Time to go, let's go swimming. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swim, swim. we swimming up to the surface. Plop. Making our way downtown, walking fast. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Let's go, let's go, let's go. We're not waiting around for these doors. We're just living the straight thug life. We just playing the game straight. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Shoo! Boom. Oh, time to go fast. See who will join us. See if we can get everyone. And before I immediately fail. So you can see some Ichthyosaurus and Dolichorhynchops joining us, along with some Tiktaalik. It's interesting, like, how they managed to fit so many animals so many times together. Like, Anomalocaris is the oldest out of pretty much all of them. See if we can get everyone. Come on, come on, come on. Yes. Look at these ruins, isn't that incredible? I just think, oh, we missed one, damn it. We should just see like the story of what happened here. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Look at that. Everything's so flooded over. Go and do our thing. Chug, 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 chug. Now it's time to go say hello to our little friend over here. Look at an arowana bait ball. Arowanas in the wild don't really form bait balls like this, but I can see it for a fact. So these are very cute Ichthyosaurus. It's actually a recent find is that shows that like these Ichthyosaurus, not Ichthyosaurus itself, but a member of the group had kind of like this extensive blubber going on, which is pretty interesting. So they would have been a lot thicker than we thought we would. Which is good, important that blubber is often used to, because the water can get pretty cold, especially if you dive deeper. So having a layer of blubber to help insulate you is always good. We're going to quickly make our way down here. We already swam around with our Ichthyosaur buddies. Uh-oh, what's happening? I'll have a drink while we're waiting. Oh, time to swim. We've got that many species to cover anymore. Oh, oh, oh. It's a great white shark. Uh-oh, uh-oh. We're going so fast. Whee! That's a perfect example to talk about the great white sharks. Now, great white sharks, also known as great whites, obviously they are known as great whites, but also known as just white sharks or white pointers, are a large mackerel shark that come from coastal waters from pretty much all over the world. They can get pretty big, with sub-large females getting up to 6.1 or 20 feet long, 6.1 meters, and get up to about 220,000 kilos, or about a little over 2 tons. Though smaller males will measure about 13 feet and smaller females will average about 16 feet. It's just these very exceptional individuals that grow that huge. And they're also believed to live about 70 years old, which is probably the longest lifespan of every fish we know, or cartilaginous fish we know. So all the sharks are raised, so the longest living shark will raise one of them, other than like Greenland sharks. And they take very long to mature, which is about 26 years for females, and for males, and 33 for females. And are pretty deep divers too, and fast swimmers. They can swim up to 56 kilometers an hour and dive to about 12,000 meters, or 1,200 meters, I mean. They pretty much have no natural predators. They except for killer whales, which have been actually figured out how to turn them on their backs, which means that they get into like this hypnotic stance, so that's free, so they're safe from the bite of the shark, so they can go and kill them efficiently. Which is a little bit sad. Found pretty much everywhere. They're pelagic fish. They feed on anything. They'll feed on... Younger sharks actually tend to feed more on large fish, and as they get older they tend to turn marine mammals like seals and dolphins. And like other sharks, they have the ability to like detect blood and electromagnetic fields, so they can sense when an animal is injured and such. And they're very slow breeders just because they took so long to mature, and they also only give birth to a few pups. And they're also ovoviviparous, which means they lay eggs inside the uterus, but they continue to develop until the female shark actually gives birth to them in shallow areas where they can grow up. And they give birth to about no more than 14 pups. The rapid's 14 pups, so it's no more than 14. And yeah, pretty safe from pretty much everything in the ocean, except they are affected a lot by overfishing and shark fin soup, which they use. They just cut off the fins of the shark and throw it in the water, which is obviously bad since these sharks take so long to mature and are apex predators. It takes so long for them to recover when their populations are depleted, so they're being protected around the world. And one really sad thing is the public's perception of sharks is that they're terrible, scary monsters, but in reality a lot of shark attacks are really just mistaken identity, where they're believed to be seals, or maybe even just they don't even know what they are. It's mistaken silhouette, mistaken for a sea lion, and they don't actually actively hunt people. So it's kind of sad to people like movies like Jaws perpetuate that idea that sharks are killer monsters. And sadly, they haven't actually been kept in captivity that much. There's been some attempts by like SeaWorld and Monterey Aquarium, but they always try to release them when they're old enough, because they often only live very long in captivity, because they need such large tanks that it's very hard for them to get used to sitting around in a tank walls, because they live in the ocean where there's no walls, so often they'll hit walls and tanks by accident and injure themselves, and also refuse to eat, because once they get older they start to eat seals and other marine mammals, which is harder to provide for them. I think the longest that they've had was one great white for 162 days. It was a juvenile male, and then they released him out into the wild, which is sad. And also, if you want to go cage diving and stuff, there's always interesting ways to experience these animals. I really want to do it sometime when I get the chance, because I really love to dive with a great white shark, since they're such beautiful animals. And also one other species here we can see is a clown triggerfish. It's not too different from other triggerfish. It's mainly just the patterning. They eat they get to about 15 centimeters long, 50 centimeters, and are found pretty much around the Indian and Pacific Ocean, which feed on like benthic organisms like crustaceans and mollusks, and are active during the day and are pretty solitary. They don't shoal up like this, and defend a territory, which means they're very aggressive to other fish. So if you try to keep them in a tank, you make sure there's enough space to have, so they don't feel territorial, and there's enough space for all the fish. And they should not be kept with small fish in captivity or in a large aquarium. So you gotta always make sure that you keep them with fish that's enough space for other fish to get away from them. And they'd be contained enough even to be hand-fed, but you gotta be careful because they have pretty sharp teeth. So now I think we're done talking about these fish. We're gonna actually play the game. We're gonna do our sharky thing. So look, isn't here a beautiful shark? So huge. Just interesting. It's really cool they also get to see them in a light that's not like a murderous predator. I think that's interesting. See some juvenile golden trevally. Whee! So these are fun to just jump out of the water. We'll move on to. No new species in here at the moment. Boom. Then have it rise up. And these cool manta rays. Okay, let's go. Just look how big they are compared to manta rays. Look at that. Oh. So we don't even need to worry about going fast. Just chill. There should be the orcas. Who doesn't love killer whales or orcas? The only natural predator of great whites. Let's go, let's go. There's a new species in here. See the sailfish, we'll have a look at them after we've done this. Those scalloped hammerheads, along with those big old whale sharks, largest fish in the ocean. So even compared to the great white, so you can find a sailfish. There should be some here. There we are. Yeah. Now sailfish are quite famous. They're very similar to marlin. And there's two species. There's the Atlantic and Indo-Pacific sailfish. And I believe to be some of the fastest fish in the ocean. They can swim quite fast. I'm trying to find the exact number. And they're very famous for like trophy fishing because they're so fast and really to fight when you try to fish them. They're very famous for sport. And one thing that's really interesting is that they'll often pull up those fins when they feel threatened. It's like a very interesting display that they do with them. Let's see if I can find more info. Yeah. They get up to about 1.5 meters long, which is a pretty good size, and they use their long little spike at the front, like similar to marlin. They use them to whack at fish and disorient them so they can eat them. They can get pretty big too, like with they can get, what's the weight? They can swim to about 130 kilometers an hour, which is pretty damn fast. And they will not go too fast, but they do not sometimes. But when they raise the sail, they tend to. What was it what I'm reading? When they're about to attack their prey, they usually put their fin up like that. So look, they're going to attack something. It's a pretty interesting little detail that they added. Probably just to help keep themselves stable. I really like the beautiful patterns as well, with the yellow and the blue. Very interesting fish. Now I think we've got to leave them alone, and then we'll move on to the great white and actually carry on with the story. Can't even get in. Oh no. There we are. There we are. Crash that. We're gonna blow it up. Let's see. Here it's like it's a mix of like the prehistoric and missile stuff. And here we got the giant squid. We're almost there, boys. Uh-oh. Now we're gonna see something. Oh. Whoa! Look at that. We should have spent some time hanging out with these whales. Hang on to one while he's breaching. Oh, wow. Kind of hard to figure out where you're going with all those fish swimming behind you. So come over here. Look at that. He jumping out the water. Whee! Right on a snout too. This gives you just a sense of how huge these blue whales are. Look at that. Look how huge they are. Ridiculously ginormous. Oh, he's just flipping around doing his thing. So even a great white shark looks tiny next to a blue whale. Oh, look at that. So majestic. See if we can get to do another jump. Looks like he's about to watch. Ooh, wee! Flip around, splash. Now we don't often see blue whales doing that in real life, but I would allow this game to embellish, because what's not fun about jumping around with blue whales? See if we can find it. There's a little Easter egg over here I want to see if I can find. There it is. Oh. Might be that last issue, but we'll see if we can get up here. I'm good at jumping. Oh, Ah! Have to organise myself properly. Orientate myself. Come on, let's do it. Nah, we won't bother. Struggling with it. So one thing about this game is I don't have a controller, but we can still play it alright with this. Have a look over here. Some interesting animals over here. Start with the narwhals over here. Oh, this fish, all these fish are just dizzy, making me dizzy. It's kind of hard to figure out which way you're actually going. There's some narwhals. Oh, we don't want to hang out with the shark. We want to grab a narwhal, swimming in the ocean, causing a commotion, because they're so awesome. Oh, we get to hang on to a penguin. Now, these are Adelaide penguins. They come from pretty much Antarctica. Very common species. They get to about 71 centimeters tall and about 6 kilos at the biggest. And they swim at about 8 kilometers an hour, but can leap pretty high. They can leap up 3 meters out of the water to land on ice and rocks. It's very cool. They're found they're regularly played on by things like leopard seals and giant petrels and even orcas. They prey on them. There's a bunch of colonies. There's believed to be about 4 million, almost, breeding pairs that are found around 250 breeding colonies around Antarctica. Very interesting group. They tend to come onto land and build nests, and they'll lay a couple eggs, like most penguins do. And then the male will stay, kind of like emperor penguins. They'll stay and protect the eggs while the female goes out and looks for food. And they eat about pretty much anything they can find. They can find silverfish, krill, squid, pretty much anything they can find. And they breed around October, November, where they make these big colonies, and they take turns incubating the eggs. It's pretty interesting. And they migrate huge. They migrate about 13,000 kilometers each year to follow the sun from their breeding colonies to their foraging grounds and then migrate back. It's pretty interesting to see how far they'll go. And yeah, another pretty interesting little creature. Let's see, have a look. Where is our narwhals? I just want the shark to leave me alone for a minute. Oh yeah, we got narwhals. Very pretty. Now, narwhals are closely related to belugas, and they're found around the Arctic, like from Greenland, pretty much everywhere. And get to about 5 meters long, with males being slightly bigger, and have these big tusks. They become sexually mature at about 11 to 13 years old, while the females become sexually mature about 5 to 8. And they're primarily found around the Arctic. They're quite deep divers as well, so they'll often dive pretty deep, up to about 1,500 meters, and with dives being up to 25 minutes. And they very like to communicate with like whistles and knocks and such. Why is he not letting me? They don't let me hang out with these narwhals, don't they? I don't like it. They hang out around pretty much everywhere in the Arctic. Now, they're interesting because they're the origin for the legend of the unicorn, because their horns there that they use to stun prey and also tusk with other males are known for stunning prey and tusking. It was believed when they were found to be said to belong to unicorns, so narwhals are the reason unicorns exist. Live in groups, and often famous like in documentaries to see them hunting around sea ice, which is pretty interesting. Where they live in groups about individuals between 5 to 10, sometimes 20. It's kind of hard to talk and like, find them as well. Here we are. I think they should be hanging around like that. And sometimes they'll often like make big aggregations, and they'll be in groups up to thousands, where males like he was tusking to fight for dominance. They pretty much eat whatever they can find, like halibut, Arctic cod, shrimp, cuttlefish, squid, wolffish, pretty much anything they can find that's deep. And also it's very similar to like beak whales. They'll pretty much eat whatever they can find at the deeper parts of the ocean. Yeah, pretty deep divers too, believe it or not. Similar to beak whales, and make all sorts of different clicks and such to communicate with each other. Just watching him around do his thing. And they're not very hunted by much. They're hunted by polar bears, which will often like stand on the ice and grab them. Also, we get eaten by Greenland sharks and walrus. And believe it or not, walruses often attack them for their breeding holes. Along with killer whales will also attack young orcas, not young narwhals, I mean, and also adult ones too. And they're pretty much necessarily predators. And one thing that's also affecting a lot of these species, along with the Adelaide penguins and such, is climate change, because obviously with the world heating up, the ice caps melting, there will be less habitat for these guys, so we really should try and protect the habitats that they have, because they're very important not just for the environment, they're important for the Inuit, which often have no other food, so they often just hunt these whales because that's all the food they have. So yeah, we need to protect those. I might go have a look at the polar bear. I won't talk about much about the polar bear because I've covered polar bears in like other episodes, but we'll just talk about some general facts about them. I've covered them in Planet Zoo because they were in Planet Zoo as well. There we are. Look at these cute little penguins. See them? Look at the eggs here. Watch this. He's awake. He's very cute. Our polar bears are pretty much found all over the Arctic, of course, and they can get up to about 700 kilos and about 13 feet long, which is pretty huge. Makes them the largest terrestrial carnivore. They're especially adapted for eating seals. They even have like extremely potent bile, which allows them to really easily digest fats, and they have this white transparent fur to help them camouflage into the snow. And they're also very susceptible to climate change. Even recently, since the sea ice has been melting, they've been coming around to more areas, even coming into towns looking for food, which means bears and people are obviously not a good mixture, and both people and bears get hurt when they meet, so you've got to be careful with those. Yeah, they pretty much just eat whatever they can. Mainly specialize in hunting like seals and marine mammals, but they can like to hunt on the sea ice. And they're actually technically still considered a marine mammal because they can swim, they can dive quite deep actually, so they dive about 6 meters and swim quite far distances, which is pretty interesting. And very cool. So they're technically a marine mammal. And what happens with females is that while the males stay out and hunt sometimes, when a female has gives birth to a cub, she goes and then hibernates, and then once summer comes, her and her babies will emerge out the den and do their thing. They eat a lot of ringed and bearded seals, pretty much whatever they can find in the Arctic. They're pretty flexible. They'll even eat like plants occasionally. And they tend to live for about 25 years, really. The oldest wild bear has been 32, and the oldest captive one's 43. And they're a pretty important animal in the Arctic, since they control populations of animals like seals, and also other animals like Arctic foxes and such will steal from their kills. And even like indigenous people often hunt them to sell and to eat, because obviously there's not too much to eat in in the Arctic, so often they're they don't really eat them too much, but they usually just harvest them for like their furs and such, and use them for trade as well. So their arc is controlled, so you're only allowed to kill like 150 a year. And yeah, being affected by climate change definitely helps them, and pollution. And a lot of people think that as ice caps melt, polar bears will become starved because they won't be able to hunt, which will be very sad. They're very important for the Inuit, but anyway, I think we should carry on and finish the game. I think we're almost done. You see the whales jumping around over there. Let's go, Mr. Sharky. Or Mrs. Sharky, I'd say. Since she's a big one. She's a big one. Speedy, speedy, speedy. Look at those big whales. Ridiculously huge. Swim, 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 swim. I don't think I'm able to swim in with the shark in here. Let's go. I'm gonna destroy him. Boom. Oof. Kablooya. I think this tells a really interesting story about how the oceans will recover if we take care of it. If you see here, we'll just watch. A lot of reefs and stuff will even like put themselves on shipwrecks and such. And if we take care of our planet, we can really make sure that both we and wildlife, which is all very important, everything's connected, circular life, all that, everything affects everything. So if we manage to preserve fish stocks and marine ecosystems, it'll help us survive for the future. There'll be more fish, there'll be more oxygen, they'll protect us from climate change. It's very important. See how beautiful it is. If we just leave nature alone for a little bit, it tends to recover itself. So I think that means we're finished here. I'll have a quick look and we'll see what other species. I don't think there's any new species, just a bunch of species that we've seen before. ABZU, beautiful game. I find it fitting that a gaming company called Giant Squid made this, because obviously giant squid's a marine animal. Look, I see seahorses and emperor anglerfish, pipefish and such. But yeah, that's what you do, I think. Okay, so I really hope you guys like this series, and I hope you guys like and subscribe, of course. I really want us to have some more stuff planned. I really want to make more Jurassic World Evolution mod videos. I just want to make other playthroughs, so if you guys want to request anything, I can't think of anything right now. If you guys want to request something, I'm more than happy to give it a shot. And yeah, hopefully you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.